Let's be real, our whole world is connected now. We're talking everything from our phones and our banks to our jobs. But with all that connection comes a pretty constant risk. So today, we're going to break down exactly how you can protect your digital life. We're going to learn how to build a digital fortress. Let's jump right in. You've probably heard it before, but it's true. It's not a matter of if an attack will happen, but when. Every single day, people, companies, you name it, are facing a non-stop barrage of threats. So that leads to the big question, right? How do we actually defend ourselves? How do we build a defense that can really stand up to these constant attacks? You know, a strong fortress isn't just one giant wall. It's a whole system of defenses working together. And our digital fortress, it stands on 5 critical pillars. First up, we'll lay the cybersecurity foundation. These are the core principles. Then we'll get into planning for a crisis, because you've got to have a plan for when things go south. After that, we'll talk about controlling the gates, which is all about access. Then we'll cover securing the network, the roads and pathways of our fortress. And finally, we'll look at the daily security grind, the everyday work that keeps this whole thing from falling apart. All right, let's start with pillar number 1, the cybersecurity foundation. It just makes sense, right? Before you can build anything that lasts, you have to understand the fundamental rules. Think of these as the laws of physics for a digital world. So the absolute bedrock of all information security is something called the CIA triad. And no, not that CIA. This one stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The easiest way to think about it is like a sealed letter. Confidentiality means only the right person can open it. Integrity means the message inside hasn't been changed along the way. And availability? Well, that just means the letter actually gets delivered so you can read it when you need it. Pretty much every security measure out there is just trying to protect one or more of these 3 things. Okay, don't let this diagram scare you. I know it looks super technical, but it shows something that's actually really simple and really powerful: the recipe for risk. See, risk isn't just some vague, spooky thing. It needs 3 specific ingredients. You have to have a threat, like a hacker. That threat needs a vulnerability to exploit, which is just a weakness. And they need a target, which is the asset, your valuable stuff. As you can see, it's only in that little spot where all 3 of those circles overlap that a real risk actually exists. So you've identified a risk. Now what? What do you do about it? Well, you've basically got 4 moves you can make. First, you can just accept it. Maybe the cost to fix it is way more than the damage it could cause. Second, you can avoid it by just, not doing the risky thing anymore. Third, you can transfer it. That's basically what buying insurance is. Or, and this is the most common one, you can mitigate it. That's when you take action, build defenses, and do things to make that risk less likely or less damaging. And that leads us perfectly into pillar number 2. Because look, no matter how good you are at mitigating risk, you have to work with the assumption that one day something will go wrong. This pillar is all about planning for that crisis. Now, here's something that trips a lot of people up: the difference between business continuity and disaster recovery. Think of it like this. Business continuity, or BC, is your plan to keep the lights on and keep things moving during the hurricane. Disaster recovery, or DR, is your plan to rebuild the house and get everything back to normal after the hurricane is passed. One is about surviving, the other is about recovery. Okay, I know this diagram looks a little intense, but it shows the life cycle of a security incident perfectly. Don't even worry about the text, just follow this circle. It all starts with preparation, which is what you do before anything happens. Then comes detection. You realize something's wrong. Next, you move into containment and cleanup, stopping the damage from spreading. But honestly, the most important part is the last one: post-incident activity. This is where you ask, okay, what did we learn, and how do we make sure this never ever happens again? Okay, so we've got a plan for when disaster strikes. Now it's time for pillar 3, controlling the gates. A fortress is pretty useless if you just let anyone wander in and out, right? This is all about being super careful about who gets access to what and when. And that control, believe it or not, starts in the real physical world. It's so easy to forget that all our precious digital stuff lives on actual physical computers in actual buildings. So that first line of defense has to be stuff you can touch. Fences, locked doors, security guards, those little turnstiles that only let one person in at a time, cameras, and of course, alarm systems. These are the literal outer walls of our fortress. Now, once you get past those physical gates, you hit the digital ones, and there are 3 main ways this works. With discretionary access control, or DAC, if you create a file, you get to decide who sees it.
with mandatory access control, or MAC. The system has a very strict top-down policy that nobody can change. But by far the most common is role-based access control, RBAC, and it's simple. Your job title determines what you can access. You work in sales, you get access to the sales drive. It's clean, efficient, and it scales really well.
And underpinning all of these models is one of the absolute golden rules of cybersecurity, the principle of least privilege. The idea is incredibly simple, but so powerful. You only give people the absolute bare minimum access they need to do their job, and not a single bit more. Why? Because if that user's account ever gets hacked, the damage is contained. The hacker can't get to anything the user couldn't get to. It's a huge deal.
And that brings us to Pillar 4. We've controlled who can get in the gates, but what about all the roads and pathways inside the fortress? We have to secure those communication channels. It's time to lock down the network.
Whoa, okay, take a deep breath. These look like they're straight out of an engineering final exam, right? But the core idea is simple. To secure a network, you need a map of how it works. And that's all these are, maps. They break down the crazy complex process of sending data into different layers, from the physical wires at the bottom to the apps on your screen at the top. The big takeaway is that network security isn't just one thing, it's about adding specific protections at every single one of these layers. Speaking of the network's pathways, the internet's entire address system just got a massive, massive upgrade. The old system, IPv4, had about 4.3 billion addresses. Sounds like a lot, but we used them all up. The new system, IPv6, gives us, well, it's a number so big it's kind of meaningless, 340 trillion addresses. But here's the important part. IPv6 was designed from day one with security built right in, which makes it a much stronger foundation for everything we do online. And that brings us to our final pillar, number 5, the daily security grind. See, a fortress isn't something you just build and then forget about. It needs constant patrols, constant maintenance, constant vigilance. And that, right there, is the world of security operations. This chart is actually really cool. It's from the official ISC² certification exam, and it gives you a great behind-the-scenes look at how important each of these pillars is in the real world. You can see that our big foundational pillars, principles, access control, and network security, take up the biggest chunks. But security operations and crisis planning, those are the essential everyday processes that keep the whole thing running safely. A huge part of those daily operations is protecting data with encryption. Now again, ignore the complex-looking stuff in this diagram for a second and just focus on the main idea of symmetric encryption. It's actually beautifully simple. You have one single secret key. That one key does everything. It's used to lock the data, encrypt it, and it's the same exact key used to unlock it or decrypt it. It's fast, it's efficient, and it's one of the most fundamental tools we have for keeping information safe. Another absolutely critical daily job is something called system hardening. I want you to imagine that every program and every open connection on a computer is like a door or a window that an attacker could try to get through. Hardening is just the process of methodically going around and locking every single door and window that you don't absolutely need to be open. You get rid of software you don't need, you tighten up the settings, and you shrink that attack surface, making it a much, much harder target to hit. But here's the thing. You can have the highest walls, the strongest locks, the best guards, the most advanced tech in the world. And all of it can fall apart in an instant if someone on the inside just opens the gate for the bad guys. Because at the end of the day, all 5 of these pillars are held together by the most important element of all, a culture of security awareness. People are and always will be the first and the last line of defense. So, we've walked through the 5 pillars that make up our digital fortress. They all have to work together. But that leaves us with one final and, I think, pretty critical question to think about. If one of these pillars were to completely crumble and fail, which one do you think would cause the most catastrophic damage to the entire fortress?